Hi everyone. We are a little more than halfway through the year. It's July 15th, so I thought I would give you all a little check-in about my reading so far this year. Overall, I have read 36 books so far this year, which means I'm a little bit ahead of how many books I normally read. I usually read between 60 and 65 books a year. So I'm on track to read like 70 books, which is a lot. We'll see if I get there. But strangely, I feel like I haven't been reading as much as I normally do, even though I'm actually reading more. And I feel like that's because I haven't read as many books that I've loved as I did last year. I'm reading a lot of books that I'm really enjoying and liking a lot, but more like 4 out of 5 stars versus like, wow, this book is incredible and I'm feeling blown away by it. So I think that that's why I'm feeling like I haven't read as much as I actually have. And a lot of the books haven't been as memorable to me. So I feel like that's something that I want to change for the second half of the year, if I can help it. I think one thing that I have been doing more this year than last year is not finishing books, which is great. I've officially not, or like officially set aside, like I'm not gonna finish this, like 6 books so far this year. I think last year, I have my little spreadsheets here because I like to track, because it's fun to look back at what you read. Last year I didn't finish 7 books in the entire year. So I've already like stopped reading a lot of books. I think that's also part of it too, is I'll read like half of a book and be like, I'm not enjoying this, like I'm just gonna stop, which is good because I think it's made me actually read more and get through more. But some of the books that I started and didn't finish, I really thought I was gonna love, like Butter by Asako Yuzuki. It was like a murder mystery, like Japanese murder mystery about cooking, and I just wasn't enjoying it at all. Surprisingly, I usually like murder mysteries and Japanese fiction, but that was one of them. And then Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, I'd been wanting to read for a really long time, and I read The Martian and I really enjoyed that book, but this one just didn't do it for me and I stopped. It was like a little bit cringy, to be honest, as I was reading, and so I was like, I'm not gonna finish this. And then Chlorine by Jade Song was another one I'd been wanting to read this summer. It was on, and I mentioned it in my last video, my summer TBR list. And I got like halfway through that book and I was like, this is weird and, in my opinion, not that well written. And so I stopped. So I'm glad I have been doing that because it's let me move on to books that I am enjoying more. But yeah, I've been finding less books that I've been blown away by this year. So I hope to change that. And I have a strategy and plan that hopefully will help me. But yeah, so I read 36 books. I've mostly been reading literary fiction, just kind of like general fiction. And then the second high, I've read 11 of those. And then the second highest category is historical fiction. I've actually read 9 historical fictions this year, which is a lot. Usually my second or even most read category is memoirs and essays, which I've only read 5 of this year. So I think that that's one thing I want to change in the second half of the year, is read more memoirs, because I love memoirs and I haven't been reading many of them. So as many as I usually do, at least. So I am hoping to read more for the rest of the year. Historical fiction is a genre that I do really enjoy, but it almost never is one of my favorite books is a historical fiction book, even though I enjoy reading them. So doesn't mean I'm going to stop reading them, but maybe cut back on those a little bit. We'll see what happens. I have been reading a lot of like medium length books, like 200 to 400 pages this year, which is interesting because I wrote down a few goals at the beginning of the year that I wanted to accomplish. And I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place with this, but I wanted to not be afraid of long books, and I really have not followed that either. I've only read one book over 500 pages this year. I don't even remember what it was. It was probably like 550 pages, like nothing super long, and 2 books between 400 and 500 pages. And usually long books aren't my favorite books either, but I feel like they do give you more time to get invested in the story if it is really well written. And so I don't know, we'll see, but it's also exciting and fun to read shorter books because then I get to keep myself interested by having more variety. So we'll see what happens with that. I may continue being afraid of long books and read more short books for the rest of the year. And then another interesting goal that I had was to read books from 15 new countries. I've mentioned this in like every single video, but I'm trying to read a book from every country. It's going to take me many, many years to do, but I wanted to try to read 15 this year. And I've already read a book from 10 new countries. So that is really exciting. I'm very happy about that. I think when I'm reading books from a different country and culture, it can be tricky because I sometimes won't resonate with the book as much. I mean, it totally depends. Some of the books from other countries have been some of my favorite books. One of my favorite books from this year is Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga, how do I say her last name? Olga Tokarczuk, I think is how I pronounce her last name. And that is probably one of my favorite books that I've read this year. But sometimes, you know, cultural references and things like that, I won't get them for obvious reasons. And so I feel like that can mean that they can be more difficult to connect with. So that's a downside, but I do really find it eye-opening and very just like fulfilling to kind of broaden my reading horizons and you know, try new things out. And just because I don't love something doesn't mean I didn't find any value in it. So I'm going to continue with that, and but it also gives me space for the rest of the year to maybe read a little bit more, you know, either books from the US or books from countries that I've already read from before, which I have been doing a lot of. I think I've still more than half my books I've read this year have been from the US, but yeah, so that I'm happy about that one. Another one I've been trying to do is read more books by Indigenous authors, because I've noticed that I try to, you know, read books from authors from all different, you know, ethnic and racial backgrounds, but I've noticed that that's one group that I feel is like underrepresented in my reading. So I'm trying to do that. I've read only 2 so far this year. So I think that that's definitely an area where I want to read, you know, at least like 2 or 3 more in the second half of the year. And I think I only read 1 or 2 last year. So, you know, if I read 2 more, that's already more than I read last year. So that's another goal that I had. And then another one was to read more nonfiction books about science and nature, because I really enjoy those. But I'm double checking because I don't want to be wrong, but I haven't read any. And I really think that that could be something that increases my level of enjoyment I feel like I'm getting out of my reading, because I usually read a ton of like outdoor adventure books about like true stories, people like getting lost in the wilderness and having to find their way back, like true stories and stuff. And then also I want to read more of just nonfiction, like science, nature focused books in general too, because I'm in my science writing program, and I think that would be like a really great way to supplement. It's always like good to read more in a genre that you want to be writing in, and getting different perspectives. But I have not done any of that at all this year, and so I really want to make that a priority in the second half of the year. It's making me, you know, excited to read books like that. So I think that that will make me feel more excited about my reading. Continuing to read books from other countries, but not having to push it so hard because I've already read 10 out of my 15. Reading more books by Indigenous authors, reading more science, nature, true story kind of books, reading more memoirs. And also, I've been really enjoying sci-fi recently. I've only read a few sci-fi books this year, but the only author I've read more than one book from this year is Ursula Le Guin. And I've read 3 of her books and I really enjoyed all of them. And I've also noticed that a lot of the novels I've been enjoying have either had some type of magical realism or mystical element, or they're about people who kind of have a warped perception of reality, which isn't exactly like sci-fi, but it's kind of, you know, a different perspective and not necessarily tied, super grounded and tied to like reality. And so I think that I want to read more books like that for the rest of the year. So we'll see. I don't have any like specific books that I am really looking forward to, which is strange. I just finished a book, but I don't have one that I'm like, I'm gonna read this one next. So I should probably also mention a couple of my other favorite books that I've read this year. One of them is way back at the beginning of the year, The Message by Ta-Nehisi Coates. It's a memoir. It's kind of split into 3 parts about when he traveled to 3 different places and how he sees the fight for racial justice in all of these different places, and especially the last kind of section is about his time in Palestine, and that part is really interesting, and how he sees that all of these different movements for equity and justice are all really one movement and tied together. So that was really, really well written and I recommend it. I already mentioned Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead, which was another of my favorites. That's about an older woman who really loves animals, and because of that, some mysterious things start to happen toward people that she doesn't necessarily feel are treating them kindly, and that is a really great novel with an unreliable narrator. And then, yeah, I think I really enjoyed all 3 Ursula Le Guin books that I read. My favorite was probably The Word for World is Force, which is like a ecological themed sci-fi book about, you know, this colonizing group comes in and kind of tries to take over the land from the indigenous people. I guess they're all aliens in the book, but aliens that live there, and they are destroying their land and everything, and that one was really excellent as well. So I recommend those 3, but yeah, please let me know if you have any recommendations for me. I am excited for part 2 of 2025, and I hope that you all are having an amazing reading year. And yeah, let me know if you have any goals for the end of the year, and looking forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.